The scissors sliced through the quiet of the classroom like a blade through Ava's world. One moment, she was a child, proud of the intricate braids her mother wove with love. The next, she was a silent witness to her own humiliation. But as the colorful beads fell, so too did the mask of polite injustice. This wasn't just a cruel teacher's act, it was a declaration of war against a little girl's identity. And Ava, calm and unwavering, gathered every fallen braid as evidence, every hateful word as a piece of the truth. What came next would shake not just her school, but the entire system that tried to break her. The scent of chalk dust and pencil shavings filled the fifth-grade classroom at Northgate Elementary, a smell so ordinary it was suffocating. 10-year-old Ava Martin sat at her desk, diligently outlining the states on a worksheet, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her hair, intricately braided and adorned with the colorful beads her mother had helped her pick out, was a source of pride. Each clack of the beads was a small, happy sound, a reminder of the love woven into each strand. Ava was quiet but not shy, a focused observer who preferred the company of books to the loud chaos of the playground. She found comfort in the predictable rhythm of the school day, the morning bell, the drone of lessons, the quiet hum of students at work. But that day, the rhythm was shattered. Ms. Carter, a woman with a perpetually tight smile and eyes that never seemed to warm, stopped her patrol of the aisles and stood over Ava's desk. The room was quiet except for the scratching of pencils. Ms. Carter's presence was a cold spot in the otherwise sunlit room. "Ava, that noise is becoming a distraction," she said. Her voice was thin but carried an edge that made several students look up. Ava froze, her pencil hovering over Montana. She looked at her braids, then back at her teacher. "What noise?" "Ms. Carter." "That clicking," Ms. Carter said, gesturing vaguely toward Ava's head. "Your hair. It's disruptive. And frankly, it's a bit much. School is a place for learning, not for making fashion statements." A few children giggled. Ava felt a hot blush creep up her neck. She instinctively reached up, touching the smooth beads. They were just beads. She had worn them before, and no one had ever said a word. "It's just my hair," Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a violation of the dress code," Ms. Carter declared, her voice growing louder, taking on a performative quality. She walked to the front of the room, turning to face the class. "The school handbook clearly states that attire and hairstyles should not be a distraction to the learning environment, moms." This was a gross exaggeration of a vague guideline, but the students didn't know that. They only knew that Ava was in trouble. Ms. Carter's eyes scanned the room, landing on a pair of scissors in a supply caddy on her desk. A chilling idea flickered in her sharp gaze. She picked them up, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. The low hum of the classroom evaporated. Every student was now watching, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. "When a problem presents itself, we must solve it," Ms. Carter announced, her voice ringing with a false, saccharine authority. "We cannot let one person's need for ostentatious display impede the education of 30 others." She started walking toward Ava's desk, the scissors held loosely in her hand. The rhythmic snip, snip, snip of the blades opening and closing with each step she took was the only sound in the dead silent room. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She was pinned to her seat, not by any physical force, but by a paralyzing wave of disbelief and fear. This couldn't be happening. Teachers didn't do this. "Miss Carter, please," Ava started, her voice trembling. Now, Ava, I'm just helping you comply with the rules," the teacher said. Her smile never reaching her eyes, she stood behind Ava, who was now trembling visibly. Some students looked horrified. Others, caught up in the bizarre spectacle, leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Mrs. Carter gathered one of Ava's braids. Ava flinched as the teacher's cold fingers brushed against her neck. She could smell the woman's floral perfume, a scent she would forever associate with this moment of violation. Snip. The sound was shockingly loud in the silent room. A beaded braid, a testament to hours of her mother's patient work, fell onto Ava's worksheet, landing next to a half-colored map of the United States. A collective gasp rippled through the students. Snip, snip. Two more braids fell, the colorful beads scattering across the desk like fallen tears. Ava didn't make a sound. She sat perfectly still, her back ramrod straight, staring at the amputated pieces of her hair. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. Humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her, stealing the air from her lungs. She felt the eyes of every student on her, some pitying, some mocking, all watching. The experience was traumatic, damaging her sense of self-worth and triggering a deep sense of shame and anxiety. Ms. Carter held up the severed braids for the class to see. "See," she said, as if presenting a solved equation. "No more distractions. Now we can all get back to work in a proper learning environment." She dropped the braids into the trash can with a dismissive flick of her wrist. She patted Ava's shoulder, a gesture devoid of any warmth. "There, that's better." "Isn't it?" Ava didn't answer. She couldn't. Her world had narrowed to the feeling of the shorn, uneven ends of her hair against her neck and the burning shame that consumed her. The classroom, once a place of safety and routine, now felt like a hostile stage where she was the unwilling star of a cruel play. The other children began to whisper, their hushed words feeling like tiny, sharp stones being thrown at her. She lowered her head, hiding her face behind the remaining curtain of her hair, wishing she could disappear completely. The laughter of her classmates echoed in her ears, a sound that would haunt her long after the final bell rang. The public humiliation, carried out by a person in a position of authority, was a profound violation that left her feeling isolated and utterly powerless. The world outside of Ava's immediate bubble of shame was a distant, muffled roar, the whispers of her classmates, the rustling of paper. Even Miss Carter's voice resuming the lesson on state capitals, it all faded into a dull drone. Ava's entire consciousness had collapsed into the cold, prickly sensation on the back of her neck where her braids used to be. The empty space felt raw, exposed. Her gaze remained fixed on the colorful beads scattered across her worksheet, glinting like tiny, shattered jewels. Each one was a memory, a moment of her mother's hands working gently, patiently. Now they were just evidence of a violation, lying amidst the crayon territories of Idaho and Wyoming. Her stillness was not born of shock alone. It was a shield she had learned to raise, a heavy armor forged in the fire of a past humiliation. As she stared at the debris of her pride, the present dissolved, and a memory, sharp and unwelcome, rose to the surface. She was 7 years old, in the second grade at a different school on a different army base. It was a math competition. And Ava, who loved the neat certainty of numbers, had solved the final problem on the blackboard before anyone else. It was a complex, multi-step equation that had stumped even the fourth graders. When she stepped back from the board, chalk dust on her nose, she felt a surge of pride. But the teacher, a stern man named Mr. Evans, didn't smile. He looked from the correct answer on the board to Ava's small, triumphant face, and his own expression curdled with suspicion. "Who helped you with that, Ava?" he had asked, his voice loud enough for the entire assembly to hear. Ava's smile faltered. "No one," she said. I saw the pattern." He had scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "Don't lie to me. You couldn't have solved that on your own. Your father or mother must have drilled you on it." Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. "No, I did it myself. I'm good at math." Her voice rose, higher and more desperate with each word. She tried to explain her process, how the numbers fit together in her head, but her passionate defense only seemed to cement his disbelief. The more she fought, the more she insisted, the guiltier she appeared to him and to the silent, staring crowd of students and teachers. Her outburst was not seen as the righteous anger of a wronged child, but as the hysterical denial of a cheater. She was disqualified. Her mother, then a major, had to leave an important briefing to come to the school. Major Martin had listened with a face carved from granite as the principal explained that Ava had become disruptive and emotional when questioned. The accusation of cheating was almost secondary to the crime of her reaction. The car ride home was silent, thick with a tension Ava didn't understand. She had expected her mother to be angry at the teacher, at the school. Instead, her mother seemed to be dissecting the situation, analyzing it like a battlefield engagement. That evening, after Ava had cried herself out, her mother sat on the edge of her bed. The anger was gone, replaced by a calm, focused intensity that was more powerful than any shouting. Ava, she began, her voice low and steady. The world is not always going to be fair. You know that. Right, Ava nodded, sniffling. For people who look like us. Her mother continued, her gaze unwavering. The rules are different. Your brilliance will be questioned. Your strength will be called aggression. Your passion will be called hysteria. They will try to provoke you, to push you until you break, and then they will use your reaction as the reason to punish you. She took Ava's hand. You were right today. You were honest, but you lost. You lost because you let them dictate the terms of the fight. You met their loud accusations with loud emotion. And in their world, their loudness is authority, and yours is insubordination. It was a hard lesson for a 7-year-old, but it was delivered with a love so fierce it was undeniable. I'm going to teach you a different way. Her mother had said, it's what they teach us in the service. When you are ambushed, when you are in a situation where you are outgunned and outnumbered. You don't scream, you don't charge blindly. You go still, you go quiet. You let the enemy reveal their position, their tactics, their full intent. Your silence is not weakness. Amiva, it is control. It is intelligence gathering. You endure, you observe, you survive. And then you report back to your command. I am your command. You bring the facts to me, and I will bring the thunder. That lesson had sunk deep into Ava's soul. She had learned to compartmentalize the hurt, to wall it off behind a disciplined calm. She had learned that her power was not in the immediate, fiery response, but in the cold, hard collection of facts for a battle to be fought on her mother's terms, back in the 5th grade classroom. The memory settled, not as a comfort, but as a clarification of her mission. Carter had revealed her position. She had shown her full intent. The whispers and giggles of her classmates were just battlefield noise. Ava looked down at the fallen braids on her desk. They were not trash. They were evidence. With a slow, deliberate movement that cut through her fear, Ava began to gather them, one by one for one. She picked up the braids and the scattered beads, her small fingers working with a precision that belied the tremor in her heart. She ignored the curious stares. She ignored Miss Carter, who had paused her lesson to watch, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes at this new, quiet defiance. Ava placed the braids and beads carefully into her empty pencil case, a plastic box that was now a vessel for the proof of her humiliation. She closed the lid with a soft, definitive click. She had endured. She had observed. Now she would wait for her commander-in-chief. The bell for the end of the day couldn't come soon enough. The silence of the empty house was a crushing weight. Ava locked the front door behind her, the metallic click of the deadbolt echoing in the stillness. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to mock the frantic hammering of her own heart. She dropped her backpack onto the polished hardwood floor. The thud was unnaturally loud. For a moment, she stood motionless in the entryway, the events of the day replaying in her mind not as a memory, but as a continuous, looping assault. The glint of the scissors, the sickening snip, the rain of her own braids falling onto her desk, the wall of staring, silent faces. She bypassed the living room and walked with soldierly purpose to the dining room. There, under the cold, unblinking light of the chandelier, she unzipped her backpack and retrieved the plastic pencil case. The contents rattled, a sound so different from the cheerful clacking the beads had made in her hair. She opened the case and carefully, methodically, laid the severed braids upon the dark wood of the table. They lay there like sacrificial offerings, a gruesome testament to Miss Carter's violation. She arranged them in a neat row, the colorful beads forming a broken, tragic rainbow. This was Exhibit A. Her next move was calculated. Her mother had taught her that information was the most critical weapon in any conflict. Ignoring the urge to hide or cram, she retrieved her school-issued laptop, booted it up, and navigated directly to the school's parent-student portal. She wasn't looking for homework assignments. She was searching for enemy movement. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Mrs. Carter's attack wouldn't end with the scissors. It would be followed by a campaign of official justification. She found it almost immediately. A red notification flag pulsed next to her name, demanding attention. It was a disciplinary action report. The term itself was an obscenity. She clicked it open. The screen glowed with cold, bureaucratic text, a masterclass in institutional deceit. Student Ava Martin. Infraction dress code violation. Disruptive hairstyle and gross insubordination. Reporting staff, Ms. Carter narrative. During today's instructional period, it was necessary to address Ava M's non-compliant hairstyle, which was causing significant auditory disruption and impeding the learning of her classmates. The student was counseled on multiple occasions to rectify the violation. Ava refused verbal directives and adopted a posture of defiant noncompliance. When staff initiated a minimal, hands-on intervention to bring the hairstyle into compliance with district policy, the student became openly insubordinate to restore order to the learning environment. The distraction was removed. A mandatory detention is assigned for tomorrow afternoon to address the student's behavioral issues and refusal to respect authority. Ava stared at the screen, her breath held tight in her chest. The words were more brutal than the scissors. Gross insubordination, defiant noncompliance, minimal, hands-on intervention. They had not only lied, they had inverted reality. They had painted her, the victim, as the aggressor. They had transformed an act of assault into a necessary disciplinary procedure. Ms. Carter had built a fortress of lies, using the sterile, authoritative language of the system as her bricks and mortar. The detention was the final, brilliant stroke, a move to isolate her, to break her down, to force her into their version of the story before anyone could hear the truth. A hot, clarifying rage burned away the last vestiges of her fear and shame. This was the real fight. This digital document was the weapon being aimed at her mother, at her family's reputation. With swift, precise clicks, Ovia took a high-resolution screenshot of the entire report. She saved the file to a secure folder on her desktop, naming it Perjury Carter R5500 HRs. She then opened her mother's email, attached the image file, and wrote a single, clear subject line, urgent sitrep Northgate Elementary. She didn't write anything in the body. The evidence would speak for itself. She hit send. She then placed the laptop on the dining table, the screen displaying the fabricated report next to the physical proof of her braids. Exhibit A and Exhibit B, the tangible and the digital, the personal violation and the institutional lie, side by side. She sat down at the table, her back perfectly straight, her hands folded before her. The battlefield was prepared. The intelligence had been gathered and relayed. The distant rumble of a car engine grew closer. And then the familiar sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway broke the silence. Command had arrived. Colonel Imani Martin stepped into her home and was immediately enveloped by a profound and unsettling silence. It wasn't the usual quiet of an empty house waiting for life. It was the tense, coiled silence of a space that had witnessed a trauma, a career military officer with tours in active combat zones. She was attuned to atmospheres, to the subtle shifts in an environment that signaled danger. Her eyes, trained to assess a landscape for threats in a fraction of a second, swept the entryway. She saw Ava's backpack on the floor, not in its usual spot on the hook by the door, a minor deviation, but a deviation nonetheless. In her world, deviations from routine were data points, Ava, she called out, her voice calm and measured, betraying none of the sudden alertness that now coursed through her veins. There was no answer. Only the low hum of the refrigerator. Colonel Martin moved from the entryway into the main living space. She didn't walk so much as flow, her movements economical and silent. Then she saw her. Ava was sitting at the dining room table, her back ramrod straight, a posture her mother recognized instantly. It was the stance of a soldier at parade rest, a position of readiness and control. And then she saw the battlefield laid out before her. Her gaze fell first upon the laptop, its screen glowing with the stark, black and white text of the disciplinary report. She took in the title, the name Ava Martin, and the words gross insubordination in a single, rapid scan. Her eyes then moved to the objects lying next to the computer, the severed braids, the scattered, colorful beads, the pieces of her daughter's hair, which she herself had so carefully and lovingly woven just days before, were arranged on the dark wood like evidence at a crime scene. Colonel Martin's breath did not catch. Her expression did not change. The initial shock was instantly contained and converted into a cold, diamond-hard fury that settled deep in her gut. She had seen it in ambushes before. This was an attack on her child, and followed by a coordinated campaign of official disinformation. She walked to the table and stood behind her daughter, placing her hands gently on Ava's shoulders. It was a gesture of support, but also a silent command. I have the watch. Ava flinched slightly at the touch, then relaxed, leaning back almost imperceptibly into her mother's strength. She didn't turn around. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had gathered the intelligence. Her commander was now in control. Colonel Martin read the report on the screen. Every word of sanitized. Bureaucratic poison was a fresh injury. Defiant noncompliance. Minimal. Hands-on intervention. She saw the lie for what it was, a preemptive strike, designed to discredit the victim and neutralize any parental response. Miss Carter had not just been cruel, she had been tactical. A fatal miscalculation. She had assumed she was dealing with a civilian. Straightening up. Colonel Martin moved to the kitchen counter, her focus absolute. The first act of resistance would not be a screaming phone call to a hapless school principal. That was what they expected. That was a battle on their terms. No, the first act would be to move the conflict to a different theater of operations, one where they were hopelessly outmatched. She pulled out her personal cell phone. Her first call was not to the school, but to the staff judge advocate's office at the nearby Army base. This is Colonel Imani Martin, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I need to speak with the Chief of Legal Assistance. I am reporting an incident of assault, battery, and libel against a minor dependent. The perpetrator is a civilian employee of the Northgate Elementary School District. I am also flagging potential civil rights violations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I require immediate guidance on jurisdiction and the preservation of evidence. She listened, her eyes fixed on the braids on the table. Understood. The evidence has been secured. The perpetrator has also falsified an official school document to create a slanderous and retaliatory record against the victim. Yes, I have a digital copy of the falsified report. I will forward it to you immediately. Stand by. She ended the call, her movements precise. She forwarded the email Ava had prepared. The subject line, Urgent Sitrep Northgate Elementary, would be understood perfectly by any military personnel. It was a situation report, an update from the front line. Her second call was to her direct commanding officer, a 2-star general. It was after hours, but she knew he would answer. General, this is Colonel Martin. Apologies for the late call, she paused. Sir, I'm informing you of a situation that may require my full attention for the next 24 to 48 hours. My daughter, Ava, was physically assaulted by a teacher at her school today. There is a concurrent effort by the school administration to falsify records to cover up the incident. I am engaging with the JAG office now. There is no threat to my readiness. But I wanted you to have situational awareness in case this escalates. My family is my priority. By making this call, She had just elevated a local school issue into a matter of concern for the United States Army. A colonel's focus being diverted by a civilian issue was a problem. It implicitly sent a message. My readiness is your problem. This school is now affecting military readiness after the calls. A new quiet settled over the house. It was not the silence of shock, but the calm before a storm. Colonel Martin walked back to her daughter. She knelt down, so she was at eye level with Ava. You did everything right, she said, her voice now filled with a fierce, protective pride. You were disciplined. You were brilliant. You secured the evidence, and you reported. I am so proud of you. Tears finally welled in Ava's eyes, not of shame or fear, but of relief. The validation was everything. Tomorrow, Colonel Martin said, her voice low and steady as steel. You will not be attending detention. You and I are going to the school. We have a meeting to attend. She stood up, her gaze sweeping over the evidence on the table one last time. The mission is simple. We will ensure the truth is brought to light. There will be accountability. The next morning, Northgate Elementary operated with its usual hum of controlled chaos. Bells rang, children chattered, and teachers marshaled their students into orderly lines. But at precisely 8:30 m.m., a figure of absolute, unassailable order walked through the main entrance, and the mundane rhythm of the school day came to a halt. Colonel Imani Martin was in her full Army service uniform. The deep blue jacket was adorned with ribbons testifying to a decorated career. Her shoulders bore the silver eagles of her rank, and the sharp creases in her trousers looked as though they could cut glass. Her bearing was not one of arrogance, but of profound, unshakable authority. Beside her, holding her hand, was Ava, dressed in simple, neat clothes. She was not hiding her hair. The damage was visible, a stark testament to the previous day's events. Her expression was solemn, her fear replaced by a quiet resolve inherited from the woman at her side. The school secretary, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Gable, looked up from her computer and her smile froze on her face. Her eyes widened, taking in the uniform, the rank, the sheer intensity of the presence before her. Good morning. Colonel Martin's voice was calm, yet it commanded the attention of the entire administrative office. I am Colonel Imani Martin. I have a 900 appointment with Principal Thompson. I am informing you that the meeting will also require the presence of Miss Carter, the 5th grade social studies teacher, and the school district superintendent. I have already left a message with his office. Please confirm they will be in attendance, either in person or via teleconference. Mrs. Gable stammered, the superintendent, but this is a preliminary hearing regarding a formal complaint of assault against a minor, Colonel Martin stated, leaving no room for argument. Their presence is not optional. She and Ava took a seat, a silent, formidable island in the sea of bureaucratic bustle. By 9:00 a.m., a tense and resentful party had gathered in the principal's cramped office. Principal Thompson, a man whose authority was usually cushioned by a false folksiness, sat behind his desk, looking pale and flustered. Miss Carter was perched on the edge of a chair, her face a mask of defensive indignation. On a large monitor on the wall, the face of Superintendent Davis appeared, his expression one of extreme annoyance at having his morning disrupted. Colonel Martin and Ava sat opposite them. Colonel Martin placed her briefcase on the floor beside her. She began without preamble. At approximately 14:15 hours yesterday, she said, her voice echoing the clipped precision of a formal military briefing. A licensed educator in this institution, Ms. Susan Carter, committed an act of assault and battery against my 10-year-old daughter. Ava Martin, Miss Carter scoffed. Now, just a minute, I was enforcing the school's dress code. Your daughter's hair was a distraction, and she was being defiant. Principal Thompson jumped in, shuffling papers. Colonel, we have a documented record of the incident. While Ms. Carter's methods may have been unorthodox, the report clearly states there was an issue of insubordination. Colonel Martin held up a hand, a gesture that silenced them both instantly. The document you are referring to is not a record. It is a work of fiction. A fraudulent report filed in a clear act of retaliation in an attempt to obstruct the truth from her briefcase. She removed a clear, sealed evidence bag. Inside were the shorn braids and the loose beads. She placed it in the center of the principal's desk. The object landed with a soft, accusatory weight. Exhibit A, she said coolly. The physical results of the assault. Ms. Carter paled slightly. The superintendent leaned closer to his camera, his annoyance shifting to alarm. Next, Colonel Martin pulled out a tablet and turned it on. The screen showing the disciplinary report Ava had screenshotted. Exhibit B, the libelous and falsified official document. This is absurd, Miss Carter snapped, her voice rising. She was making noise. The other children were distracted, and she refused to listen. There were 30 witnesses. I'm glad you brought up witnesses. Ms. Carter, Colonel Martin said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. It was the shift in tone that signaled the true attack was about to begin. Because I agree that what happened in that classroom needs to be seen. She paused, letting the tension build until it was a palpable force in the small room. My legal counsel from the staff judge advocate's office informs me, she continued, that this school district, as part of a post-pandemic technology upgrade, installed new smartboard systems in several fifth-grade classrooms. These systems, for the purpose of lecture capture and remote learning support, include an integrated cloud-connected video camera. A flicker of pure, unadulterated panic crossed Ms. Carter's face. Principal Thompson's jaw went slack. On the monitor, Superintendent Davis went rigid. Colonel Martin slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a formal letter from the U.S. Army's Legal Department. This is a legal request for the immediate preservation and release of the complete, unedited video and audio recording from Miss Carter's classroom. Dated yesterday, between the hours of 13:00 and 15:00, it is now considered critical evidence in a pending legal action regarding assault, battery, and civil rights violations under Title VI. The room was utterly silent. The lie had been called. The bluff had been exposed. The 30 witnesses Miss Carter had been so confident in were now irrelevant. There was one witness that mattered, a cold, impartial, digital eye that had recorded everything. The monologue, the approach with the scissors, Ava's terrified stillness, the cutting, the teacher's triumphant display of the braids, the complete absence of any defiant noncompliance. The mask of indignation on Mrs. Carter's face crumbled, replaced by the stark terror of someone whose carefully constructed reality had just been annihilated. Principal Thompson looked from the legal letter to Miss Carter, then to the unblinking eagle on Colonel Martin's shoulder, a profound understanding of his own catastrophic mismanagement dawning on him. You have 1 hour to deliver that footage to the email address cited in this letter, Colonel Martin said, standing up in a single fluid motion. Ava stood with her. In the interim, Ms. Carter is to have no contact with any students. Her employment is to be suspended, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation, and this fraudulent report, she gestured to the tablet, will be expunged from my daughter's file before the end of the business day. She looked directly at the superintendent on the screen. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification of terms. Without another word, she and Ava turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind the ruins of a conspiracy and 3 people trapped in the glaring, unforgiving light of the truth. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Even before Principal Thompson could fully process the legal demand on his desk, his phone buzzed with a call from the district office. The superintendent, his voice a blade of pure panic, gave the order Susan Carter was to be placed on immediate, non-negotiable administrative leave. 10 minutes later, as a security guard escorted a stunned and weeping Miss Carter from a side entrance with a box of her belongings. The first post appeared in the Northgate Elementary Parents Facebook group. A mother, whose son had witnessed the assault, described what happened in stark, horrified detail. She wrote of the scissors, the humiliation, and the brave little girl who had endured it. She ended her post with a simple, Powerful question, who is protecting our children from the teachers? The post detonated. Within 30 minutes, it was a raging wildfire of outrage. Dozens of parents chimed in. Stories that had been isolated whispers now formed a chorus of condemnation against Miss Carter, citing past incidents of harshness, unfair punishments, and remarks tinged with racial bias. The narrative that the superintendent had hoped to control was being written in real time by the community he was supposed to serve. At the same time, in the quiet of her dining room, Colonel Martin received an email. The video file was attached. She initiated a secure conference call with Captain Hayes from the JAG office and played the footage. The assault was clinical and brutal on screen. The audio captured every taunt from Miss Carter, every soft clack of the falling beads. Ava watched alongside her mother, her expression unreadable but her posture resolute. Seeing the event from an objective viewpoint cemented the truth of her violation. It's even worse than I imagined. Colonel, Captain Hayes said, his voice tight. This is a slam-dunk civil rights case. The evidence is irrefutable. But the recording didn't end. The timestamp jumped to the next morning. The video feed was now from inside the principal's office, recorded automatically by the teleconferencing software. They watched themselves leave the room. Then they heard the conspiracy begin. She's the sacrifice, the superintendent's voice said, clear and cold. We'll release a statement about a rogue teacher. We'll protect the institution. Get our lawyers to argue the video is inadmissible. A sharp intake of breath was the only sound from Captain Hayes. My God. Colonel, they just confessed to conspiring to obstruct justice. On tape. This has escalated. I'm making a call to the district attorney's office right now. This is no longer just a school matter. It's a criminal investigation. As he spoke, the first news van arrived. It pulled up across the street from Northgate Elementary, its large satellite dish slowly turning to face the school building like the barrel of a tank. The private war for accountability had just gone public. The institution the superintendent was so desperate to protect was now the center of a media siege. Its walls of lies about to be torn down by the undeniable truth captured on video. The days that followed the confrontation were a whirlwind. The story, now supercharged by the leaked classroom video, had broken free of local news and was being picked up by national outlets. Northgate Elementary School was no longer an anonymous suburban institution. It was ground zero for a national conversation about racism in schools. The school district, caught in a public relations nightmare of its own making, was hemorrhaging credibility. The superintendent and Principal Thompson had been placed on administrative leave. Their recorded conspiracy now the subject of a criminal investigation by the district attorney's office. But inside the calm sanctuary of their home, a different kind of work was being done. The battle for accountability had been won on the legal front, but the personal one was just beginning. For Ava, the victory at the school was not an end to her pain. The humiliation had left invisible wounds. She was quiet, withdrawn, and the vibrant spark in her eyes had dimmed. She spent hours in her room, not wanting to face the outside world, not wanting to be the girl whose hair got cut. Colonel Martin recognized the signs of trauma. She understood that while she had fought the institutional battle for her daughter, Ava now needed to fight her own battle to reclaim her narrative and her voice. The world knew the facts of the case, but they didn't know Ava. One afternoon, Colonel Martin sat down with her daughter, not as a commander, but as a mother. She brought with her a tablet, but instead of evidence, she opened it to a blank page. Ava, she said softly, right now, a lot of people are telling your story. News reporters, lawyers, people on the internet. They're using words like victim and tragedy, but they weren't there. They don't know your strength. They don't know the girl who sat still and gathered the evidence while her heart was breaking. She turned the tablet towards Ava. I think it's time you told your own story, in your own words, not for them, but for you. Ava looked at the blank screen, intimidated. What would I even say? You could start with your hair. Her mother suggested, tell them what it means to you. Tell them about the beads. Tell them about us. spending that time together, slowly, hesitantly at first. Ava began to type. She didn't write about Miss Carter. She didn't write about the scissors or the school. She wrote about the sound the beads made when she turned her head, a sound she called happy music. She wrote about how she and her mother would pick out the colors, how each braid was a story. She wrote about feeling proud of who she was and where her family came from. With her mother's help, she filmed a short, simple video. It wasn't a dramatic news report. It was just Ava, sitting in her sunlit living room, speaking directly to the camera. Her voice was quiet but steady. She showed the remaining braids, and she showed the empty spot where the others had been. A teacher told me my hair was a distraction, she said, looking directly into the lens. But my hair isn't a distraction. It's a part of me. It's my culture. It's my mother's love. And it's beautiful. She then held up a single, bright blue bead. Being proud of who you are should never be against the rules. The video bypassed the formal, often divisive language of the news cycle and spoke directly to people's hearts. It was shared thousands, then tens of thousands of times. It wasn't just a story about racism anymore. It was a story about a little girl's dignity. The hashtag began to trend. Soon, women and girls from all over the country and then the world began posting pictures of their own braids, their afros, their locks, their curls. They shared their own stories of being told their natural hair was unprofessional, messy, or a distraction. Soldiers, doctors, lawyers, artists, and mothers all joined in. A tidal wave of solidarity under Ava's hashtag. Ava watched, mesmerized, as the screen filled with faces that looked like hers, with hair that looked like hers, each one a declaration of pride. She was no longer just the girl whose hair got cut. She was the girl who had started a movement. She was not a victim. She was a catalyst. For the first time in days, a genuine, bright smile spread across her face. The weight on her shoulders seemed to lift, replaced by the profound and empowering realization that she was not alone. The quiet act of sharing her truth had given her back the power that Ms. Carter had tried to take away, and in doing so, had given voice to thousands more. The process of rebuilding had begun, not just for her, but for a community she never knew she had. 2 months later, the Northgate School District Board meeting was held in the high school auditorium to accommodate the unprecedented number of attendees. The air, once thick with anger and recrimination, now crackled with anticipation. The story of Ava Martin and the hashtag #MyHair is not a distraction movement had forced a reckoning that went far beyond one teacher and one school. The national attention had acted as a pressure washer, blasting away decades of unexamined policies and unspoken biases. Colonel Imani Martin sat in the second row, dressed in civilian clothes. She was not there as a soldier tonight, but as a mother. Her mission was complete. The legal consequences had been swift and decisive. The district attorney, armed with the undeniable video evidence of the assault and the recorded conspiracy, had acted. Susan Carter had pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and was sentenced to community service, mandatory anger management, and had her teaching license permanently revoked. Superintendent Davis and Principal Thompson had resigned in disgrace, facing charges of obstruction of justice and tampering with public records. Tonight was not about them. It was about what came next. The interim superintendent, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, who had been brought in specifically to manage the crisis, stood at the podium. She was a stern-faced, no-nonsense administrator known for turning around failing systems. We are here tonight because of a profound institutional failure. Dr. Thorne began, her voice resonating through the packed auditorium. A failure to protect a child, a failure to listen, a failure to see prejudice when it was staring us in the face. For that, on behalf of this district, I offer my deepest, unreserved apology to Ava Martin and her family. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Apologies without action are meaningless. Therefore, effective immediately. The Northgate School District is adopting a new district-wide policy explicitly protecting students' rights to wear their hair in natural and protective styles, including braids, locks, twists, and afros. This policy is inspired by the Crown Act, and it will be known officially as the Ava Martin Rule. A wave of applause swept through the auditorium. Colonel Martin's eyes glistened, and she squeezed the hand of her daughter, who sat beside her. Furthermore, Dr. Thorne continued, this incident has exposed a deep need for better training. We have mandated a comprehensive, district-wide cultural competency and anti-racism program for all staff, from teachers to administrators to janitorial staff. We will do better. Then her formal tone softened. She looked out into the crowd, her eyes finding Ava. But the most important changes don't come from policy. They come from courage. They come from one person being brave enough to speak their truth. There is a young leader in our community who has taught us all a powerful lesson about dignity and pride. I would like to invite Ava Martin to the stage. Another wave of applause, this one louder and longer, rose as Ava, looking small but not afraid, walked toward the stage. As she walked, a remarkable sight unfolded, all throughout the auditorium. Dozens of other young black and brown girls, and even some of their mothers, stood up. They were wearing braids with colorful beads, intricate cornrows, and proud afros. They stood in silent, powerful solidarity, a beautiful, living testament to the movement she had started. Ava reached the podium, which was a little too tall for her. She didn't try to speak over it. Instead, she walked around to the side, holding the microphone in her hand. A small figure in the center of the large stage. The room went utterly silent. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the girls who had stood for her, at her mother whose face was a beacon of love and pride. I didn't want to cause any trouble, she began, her voice clear and steady, amplified by the speakers. I just wanted to go to school. I was told that a part of me, a part that my mom and I love, was a problem. It made me feel small. It made me feel ashamed. She paused, taking a breath. But my mother taught me that silence isn't weakness. And you all, she gestured to the crowd, taught me that my voice isn't small when other people add their voices to it. The rule they named after me is nice, but I hope the thing you remember most isn't a rule. I hope you remember that every single person deserves to be proud of who they are. Your hair, your skin, your story. It's not a distraction. It's your power. She placed the microphone back on its stand. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. The profound quiet that follows a simple, powerful truth. Then, a single person began to clap, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, erupting in a thunderous standing ovation that was not just for Ava, but for the change she represented. It was a sound of healing, of respect, of a community awakened. Ava walked off the stage and into her mother's waiting arms. The shame was gone, washed away by a tide of love and solidarity. She had faced the darkness and had not only survived, but had brought the light for everyone else to see.